It's Monday morning, and I woke up with this kind of a bit of an epiphany, actually. The night before, I had spent some time wondering about what if I was a digital creator, but I worked for somebody, and then for some reason, I ended up losing my job. It would almost be like, wait, how does that make sense? Because usually a digital creator could be somebody who's an entrepreneur. So they're kind of creating content and then they have somebody who is almost supporting them by wanting to say, if you sell our product, then we will pay you as like some kind of commission. And then in doing that, we're supporting each other. So you have an idea and you're sharing it and it has like a big following or like a population that want to follow it. And we're going to add this kind of product to support you. And so when people think of what you're talking about, they'll think this product and then we'll kind of work together that way. So I was thinking about it and I was like, well, lately, what have I been talking about? So I'm not really selling anything, but my ideas do tend to revolve around something that God wants us to understand is valuable within us, which is our intellect and love for God's creation, love for the different people He sent through time that love God in a specific way over and above what normal people tend to maybe associate with regular humanity, in that they make an effort to align people with a certain ethic so that people can understand their love for God, right? So it's almost like we love God so much that we want to share that with you because we know it's going to help you the way it's helped us. And that's basically what prophets do. So then I thought, so prophets wouldn't actually sabotage people. Like they don't go out of their way to tell people to do something wrong or that might be harmful for them. They actually do the very opposite. So then I thought, okay, well, what is it that I'm sharing? And I thought, well, I mean, I guess I'm sharing kind of ideas about God. So, I mean, if God was to come to me and say, I'm going to align this product with you to support you, I would be your boss. So then I think, well, that's cool because I worship God. And if I have God as my boss, as it were, then it's like God can't fire me. He'd have to like let me sleep. And sleep's actually a pretty good comfort. So it's almost no, like that's bringing me closer to God. So then I think like I'm kind of stuck. Like who, if I'm working for myself, I'm working for humanity then. Like I have to be working for like I have to find a way to kind of bring myself back into the universe. Otherwise I'm kind of just suspended in air. So then I thought, okay, well, the story of David talks about um and Solomon, how jinn were used to be kind of subservient to David and Solomon in that they helped build technology. And for David, iron was made to be malleable. So you think, yeah, like my dad, he used to work in a foundry. And so he learned how to recycle metal. And so we went actually into the melt shop once and oh my gosh, like the temperature is unbelievably high. Like it's suffocating. And he worked there for 20 years. Before that, he was in Italy for a little bit. And then before that, he was in Egypt. And same kind of field of I guess, employ for him. Like he kind of just, I guess, gravitated towards that field of working. And when I thought about it after, I was like, that's a long time to commit to that kind of work. And it's really difficult work. And then I thought, well, it's a good thing that we have gin. Like, what is it that some people are able to withstand that like really, really, really high threshold of discomfort and be able to get through it? Like, what is the motive for that? And I guess that's what brought me to this. It's a sort of kind of what I was building on last video with sometimes parents they have so much love for creation over and above what they might have had before they became parents that they almost want to create a sense of opportunity for their kids and then by extension it becomes for humanity. And then it's sort of like uh, I want you to build on what I have been building kind of. So if you think of technology, then you think, yeah, that does make sense. So if I think uh, he made video, or sorry, he made uh, found he worked in a foundry that allowed us to understand how to recycle metal. So we're understanding something about composting from a very, very, very elemental way. So we think composting and organic material, and then we're going to metals because we find metals in the earth. But then we got to technology, which is something that helps us construct in the world. And then we think children, right? Because we have like humans and interactions with humans and then, moving and traveling. And then you think we're kind of back to our elemental source, which is kind of the earth. Like we had the fire, obviously we needed to kind of melt the metal to recycle it. And then you think, okay, so what were jinn again? And I was thinking about it. I thought, I think I had read a verse where it said that they're actually, jinn are from a smokeless fire or flame. So I thought, well, what else is there that's smokeless? But then I thought water. And in the Quran, there's narrations that water is basically what God's throne is on. So then you think, okay. And then you think like a kettle and you think boiling water and you think steam. And we know that there's steam power in the world. Like we have, I think the trains were steam engine powered. And then you think, oh my gosh, okay, so I'm getting really, really close to something. And then there's a chapter in the Quran called the smoke. And it's almost like before God was created or before he, not, sorry, before we have consciousness of God, it was just light. And then God says he created the skies and the heaven, excuse me, and earth. And but before that, it was almost like it was just smoke. So then you think, oh, it's like, so we understand that jinn existed in the world before humans. And then you're kind of just like, I'm getting really, really close to something and I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to stop. So then you kind of like, okay, I'm back to earth and I'm not going to think about something that might make me uncomfortable yet. So I mean, maybe like if this is me and I don't have any kind of scriptural founding yet, I might just be like, so I don't know what it is to be atheist. Like maybe you're a person who's agnostic, but you just don't know how to think about God because like the idea is kind of scary a little bit, and you're just like, I'm just not gonna call it God. I'm just gonna say I'm agnostic, meaning I haven't really decided how to call this existence outside of me. That's really, really powerful, and that helps us, and it was inculcate love in us. But I just don't know how to think about it, so I won't. So if I say I'm atheist, it maybe just is because I don't want to engage in discussion with people. And then they'll kind of almost want to challenge the way I think or my ideas. If I say I'm agnostic, then they'll say, well, at least you're still thinking about it and they might leave me alone. If I say I am a theist, then they might, challenge the ideas that I have about scripture and assume that I already studied it all. Maybe I haven't. So I just kind of want to wait. So this is kind of like a really gentle way of thinking about the universe with yourself because oftentimes people assume that at any age, people have already thought about these big questions and have come to like really, really good conclusions. And we have to different degrees, but it's all relative still. Like I might have just like this might be somebody who's, um, just out of high school or still in high school thinking about this, or maybe in university thinking about this and thinking, I don't know how to think about God. Like everything in public school has been mostly like evolution and biology and technology and how to build. And I'm thinking now, yeah, I want to build. Like maybe I haven't had a relationship yet. So the only love I have in my life as an experience is maybe like my family or my parents, depending on like what my family looks like. And maybe I haven't had a romantic relationship, so I don't really know how to offer and receive that kind of intimate love yet. So really my love for myself and for existence is basically what do I want to create? Like, what is it that I want to do with my life? And that's going to end up being a technology. So then you think, okay, so I don't want to sabotage people's efforts. So already I'm a high ethic, which means I'm already aligning with like a prophetic way and Muhammad all the way from, well, Adam all the way to Muhammad. I might not consciously know that, but now that if like somebody talks to me about something, I can be like, hey, that's me. And then you think, okay, well, that's cool. I don't want to sabotage people's efforts, meaning like I don't want to see them doing something good and then I feel jealous and I want to tear it apart and then leave. And then it's just like, well, why'd you do that? Like you could have just maybe asked to indulge and be like, hey, do you want to join me or can I join you or can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing? Because, I don't really have anything to do yet and I'm kind of curious about what my interests might be. Like I'm maybe leaving high school in a little bit and, I haven't really thought about what I want to do after I leave. So in this case, at least you're forming a bridge rather than breaking one. And then you might think, if this isn't something that I'm interested in, at least now I have some kind of new information about myself. So if I do end up finding a job for a little bit and I want to take a gap year, then I know, well, that was an interest that was kind of something for me to know about, and it might help me in the future with building on maybe what that maybe dislike was. I'll be able to integrate it in some other form. So think about engines and telephones, for example. So We don't really say that phones have engines, really. We see that they have like this little hard drive, like if you think of a computer. So it almost has this kind of like mini computer in it, and it has all this information in it and a processor, and it basically is able to integrate all these different algorithms like a calculator, and it give you all these different like kind of really cool, engaging applications and interactive sort of like buttons and applications, and it's just very, very nuance in all the different things that it can do. And then you think, okay, so part of it is a camera, and you think, okay, so cameras already exist. And we talked about gin, and then you think, oh, wait a minute, I haven't really thought about that yet. I don't want to. So you think, okay, so maybe I heard something about, past images or media having a reflection of a person's past existence or like traces of where they were. And then you think of water and you think of smoke. And then you think, yeah, I mean, these are all things that are like really, really existential. And then you think, okay, what else does a phone do? And then you think, oh, right, it has these tones that it can give off, right? So, like if somebody calls, I know sometimes it can beep, sometimes I can hear a voice message, sometimes I can actually have kind of like an assistant, so it'll talk to me and I can talk to it. Then you think sometimes if I'm in a meeting, but I need to know that I heard a call, I can have it like on the vibrate setting. And then you think, oh, right. And then you're like, well, what is it about? Like some people don't like that vibrating sensation on their hands. And uh, you think like that might take you to construction workers and like jackhammers and people who what is it called? Use anything that is like I mentioned last time, running, but anything that really shakes like your entire skeletal form, right? You can probably withstand that for a little bit of time and then we need a break. So then you think, okay, so of all these things that I've thought about right now, I can build a mind web. And that's kind of what I talked about, I think, in one of my previous playlists with sometimes we want to understand what our interest is, and we just need to think of one thing and then see where our mind takes us. Right. Before, maybe we wanted to remain focused, but now we're allowing ourselves, like, okay, I'm out of school. I have time. Maybe I've decided that I was going to go to school, but I'm going to give myself a year off. So I thought, well, you know what? Next week, I'm not ready to go. So you think I'm going to see if I can just take maybe a semester off and see what happens. So, or maybe lighten our course load. So if I was taking like a full like 5 or 7 courses in a semester, maybe I'll take three and see what that is, and I'll free up time to do something else to kind of augment what I'm doing in school. Right. So all these options kind of free us up and they give us so much relief because then it's like it doesn't have to be just one thing or the other, or one thing completely like fully immersed or partially another. It can be like we can think of like percentages, like from 0 to 100, and then just think like how do I want to divide things up and it'll still make a complete whole, and I have the freedom to do that. So then you go back to being like a digital creator and you think that is me being my own boss of my entire life. Like I get to choose how I want to manage my life before I decide I want somebody to manage my life for me. And what's the benefit in doing that? And then you pause and you think, well, I am going to think about that. And already you've kind of got that lateral way of thinking kind of establishing itself where you've got your expertise, whereas which is I've got this existential question that I'm sort of forming. Um, I'm not really turning anything off as though to say I don't want to think about something, even if it was something like gin that looked at the beginning like it was something scary and I shouldn't think about. I'm allowing myself to gradually allow myself to be inspired in ways that won't scare me. So going into something that scares me is actually overcoming a phobia, which is something that you're almost primed to just be scared about on instinct without really understanding why yet. So now you're like, oh my gosh, I'm overcoming fears. I'm understanding how to think out of focused sort of ways of thinking so that I can think laterally and integrate new ideas together and see how they all fit together around my strengths and maybe around something I'm not realizing can be a strength yet. And then you start to wonder, well, what is it that we have that I mean, in history that can tell us something about people who were maybe like Cain, didn't believe in knowing how to understand God, and were just their love was their work. Like some people will say, uh, a man's wife is his work, right? Or his car is his work. Almost to say that maybe men haven't really had the opportunity yet to learn from women a type of way of understanding how to deal with their emotions, right? And women haven't had the chance yet to understand how men are really work oriented or like focus in a certain way. So if we're kind of going to like an egalitarian way of understanding how to integrate Abel and Cain, we don't have to think of it as two men or two women, really. It's just I want to get a little bit before that. Like if we were in heaven and we understand I mean, before that, there was gin, which is smoke. And you think, if I take pictures of my past, does it really matter if I was a boy or a girl or who I was talking with, other than that it taught me something? You can stop there and wonder, like, yeah, that's kind of true. Like, I wonder how I can kind of give myself a perspective of past relationships or past like interactions with people. If I don't think about men and women, what can I learn from what I kind of understood to be an interaction, and uh, and kind of go forward with that. So then you think, um, a man. So okay, so let's pretend I'm a woman then, and then you say, okay, so I am somebody who was focused my entire life on just taking care of kids. So I didn't really create anything like a technology, but you can think I almost allowed myself to facilitate a way of having children and I guess life as it is exist. And it was able to kind of figure out how to figure out a technology. So if you think of love as a technology or compassion as a technology, then you're like, wow, that is really abstract. Like it's almost like we need that understanding before we can actually get to creating something. And if you think of women and you associate that with love, then you can think of men and associate that with love and think that is creating a technology. But we have to understand how to pull ourselves out before we think of that interaction creating another human being, right? Because we can't really think of humans as technology. There are people who create technology. So then you want to understand love now, and you're just like, well, like, okay, so love comes from the heart. It comes from faith in ourselves. It comes from faith in wanting to want good for others. And then you wonder, like, okay, so I'm going to pretend I'm a man then. And then you say, okay, so a man, sometimes if he doesn't know how to maybe have healthy attachment styles yet with other people, he's thinking, I just want to commit myself to work and I just want to find something that I really love doing. And I'm going to spend all my time doing it. And then I'm going to end up creating something in the world that's going to help me make money. And so you think about like all the way back, like in like way back in time, and you think, okay, maybe the first thing that was created was you think of a kettle, right? We just needed fire and a pot and then water and then we're just boiling water. So then you think, okay, well, there's gin. We could kind of understand gin now. And then you think, and then maybe after that, it was something to do with building weapons so that we can maybe find animals that we need to eat. So then you're thinking, okay, so maybe that developed into a sword. And then you have animals. So then you're thinking ways of travel. And then you think we eventually got to the car. And then what was after that? And then it was, oh, right. Well, like maybe homes was something that was, with fire. We maybe first had like makeshift huts or like, kind of like an alcove where you can maybe just have sticks and it's just kind of like a den that you lived in or like a cave. And then gradually you figured out that, wow, you can make metal. And then you maybe had first like a log cabin and then it became something that was like more an approximation of like an apartment building or like a home. So you can see how it's like trying all these different things in different parts of the world. And then now here we are in like a global village as it is. And then you're thinking, we've done a lot in different kind of pockets in time. And now that we're bringing it all together, what do we have? And you can think of tantric love. Like you can think of that kind of intimate way of putting care into everything you do so that it's not just like tunnel vision where I just have a focus and I just have to do it and that's the end. But it's I want to do it with care. So I have to make sure that what I'm aiming at is actually something I enjoy doing because then I'll have to almost force myself to pull in all elements of who I am as a human being and try to engage all of them so I can be that holistic person. So I talked about these being the spiritual self, the mental health kind of part of us, which is like cognitive, psychological, and um, kind of like psychosocial. So understanding how to understand what your nervous system is, like if it's introverted, extroverted, like how much they intertwine, and then how you want to engage with yourself in that way. And then I think I mentioned, yeah, so the social self and then I think the physical self was the last one. So if you know all that, then you're basically like you can see how all my videos they tend to sort of build on themselves with well first I need this toolkit and then I need this toolkit and then I need this toolkit and then before you know it you almost have like a if you think of sometimes when you go to any kind of menu or sometimes if you go to the airport and they'll have the kind of destinations of the airlines and the flights sort of categorized in a certain way. Like sometimes they'll have domestic or sometimes they'll have it based on the area. So for you, you can almost categorize for yourself like all the different ways you've built uh, tools for learning and then how to pull from each one and decide, okay, well, I'm going to decide that I want to go to the park and just enjoy nature. So maybe I'm just going to take pictures and I'm going to think about them and then I'll just create like a few Instagram reels about them. Right. So already there you're thinking about your toolkits. Like you can think, you know what? I want to write this down. This is basically what my understanding has been with how to apply like ideas. I don't have a pen here. Oh, here. How to apply ideas as I go because I mentioned like we are inspired beings, right? And then this is kind of like the journey journal that I started a long time ago. I filled it up. I'm really happy I did that. And then here I was thinking of doing like a mini course and kind of just packaging it and selling it eventually. Like just kind of like if people want to augment what they're taking off as a gap year, but they want to be engaged in some way that's accountable. And sometimes when we pay for something, we feel like we're more holding ourselves accountable to kind of committing to it. So I don't know. I might do it just like at a minimal price. But anyway, so it's been very difficult for me to kind of group all my ideas. So I have like progressive propagation, which is I want to step out of tradition, but I want to maintain traditional ideas, but go into the postmodern world. And then I have Halloween and the lifespan, and then lore and myth, and how do we integrate that with just our existence and like historical narratives, and then have adaptive narratives. So, to what degree can we understand like scriptural stories and then integrate them with like actual historical happenings that are kind of recent to us? So a little bit of antiquity, a little bit of recent history, and then our contemporary time. And then how do we make sense of our actual lived existence and put all of them together? So I was going to do this in kind of like a gender studies program or like entry into somebody who might want to study that as an actual formal study at university. But then it went into like a lot of like really, really deep. And I thought, that's going to be like way out of my league. I'll leave that to like professors and faculty actually in universities. But I want to be almost like that prerequisite to it. So it's almost like maybe it could be just a course that you take online, like in continuing education at Conestoga. Sometimes they have them just like an interest. And so that may be something I work on in the future. But anyway, going back to what I was saying. So then you think, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to build an idea and I'm going to say, what tools do I have to draw on from, right? So I'm going to be actual myself. I'm going to be Hiba and I'm going to say, I'm going to see what I understand about life. So I think, well, I know there's a lot of stories from Adam to Muhammad and they don't all have very detailed narratives. So I'm going to just say, maybe I'll think about prophets that I don't have narratives to, and I'm going to make one up, right? So I'm going to say, because God tells us that He doesn't have uh, all the prophets that ever came into time elucidated. So He says we named 25, but there's so many more we haven't told you about. So then you think, okay, well, I'm going to make one up. I'm going to make up a prophet, right? That's kind of like myth and Halloween, and you're just thinking, okay, well, that's lore. So already you're thinking from my toolkit, that is my kind of like you can call it like a metaphysical and spiritual self, right? So you got metaphysical and spiritual, right? So this is kind of what it's going to look like. I think I can maybe show it here. Maybe I'll have to add it as an attachment. I don't understand how this camera works. Oh my gosh, this is the camera's over there. Okay. Maybe. Yeah. You can see how this whole process of beginning something takes time and learning how to do the technology accurately is helpful. Usually. So being patient with yourself and gentle with yourself as you progress is a very key thing to remember. Okay, so then you think, so I have that, and then I have, and then so you're thinking here, my heart, and I'm thinking my eyes, right? And then so then you think my limbs because I'm healthy enough to move, and then you're thinking an interest, which is a type of love, right? And then you're thinking, I want to wonder about technology. So you're going to say, well, I know that everything is at my disposal to use. I'm not using anything to create something that's going to harm. So it's almost like if I do build, let's say I want to build a camera, a special kind of camera. Um, I want to maybe understand what features can I add to it and what sort of disclaimers would I have to add with this camera, right? Maybe it's, let's see, what could I add to a camera? Maybe it's something that, if you're viewing from one perspective, like if you've got the kind of viewfinder this way, maybe it can take two pictures at the same time, right? So this way and that way. That'd be kind of cool. Then you think, okay, so what are the ethics of that? So you have to think, well, when I give this, like kind of like a try, what is it that I have to think of remembering, to take into account? So people on like both sides, do they need to know anything about? Because when you walk through nature now, you see people like with their cameras all the time. We know that we can Photoshop pictures all the time. So to what degree are people wondering about the validity of what they see, like in any kind of media format. I think, well, maybe we're just so comfortable with each other now that we don't worry about it. Like I mentioned how God was mentioning to Muhammad as though to all humanity, like you're clear now, like you're basically at any point you can choose to engage in something, make a mistake about it, feel bad about it, maybe feel ashamed, like, oh my gosh, I could have done like a better choice, and then seek forgiveness, and then like by praying or meditating on meaning, and then forgive yourself and hope that God forgives you. If you've wronged somebody, ask for their forgiveness and God will forgive you. And that's it. Like you're pretty much clear. Like you don't have anything to really hold you back from feeling like I've cleared myself and I'm going to try again. So having that kind of positive self-esteem and positive self-identity and positive self-worth just gives us that initiative to always have a way of wanting to be proactive and having that initiative and kind of industriousness with life. So you think, okay, so I've got a toolkit of, um, I'm going to call them like the foundations of life. They're usually called the foundations of Islam, but what it is, it's really what we know of Ibrahim is that anything that your kind of heart is attached to, if for some reason you have to give it up for some reason or another, you can just say, okay, I will. And then with the intention that maybe I have something to learn from this, and I know that I'll be rewarded in a greater way in the future. And then do it, and then just see what happens. So you have witnessing. So you've got like resonance, which is what you're going to do when you go to the park. A witness response, meaning like I just want that feeling to come into my heart, which reminds me of meaningful prayer and meditation. And then you think, well, that kind of overlaps with prayer, which is worship, which is work, just me being in life and thinking about my existence. And then you think fasting, which is, well, I have to understand to what degree am I imposing on other people, right? So if people are at the park having a picnic, I'm not going to go right next to them and just start recording. Like I'm going to give them their space. I'm going to kind of allow my own space. And then if I do want to engage people, just like at random, maybe I could try to see if I can invite myself and say, I'm taking kind of like a survey of what digital creators do. Do you mind if I just take a random picture of you guys, though, to say, parks are a beautiful place because when they're maintained in this way, we have people who are able to gather in very, very relaxed and leisurely ways. And it's a good way to engage with nature, absorb like a healthy kind of green therapy. And it's a very good way to enhance our overall well-being in so many ways outside of the social and maybe work aspect that might have been involved there. So you think, okay, so I have to be careful with impulse control. And so maybe if I'm working on my communication skills, I have to figure out how to kind of segue into a conversation then out of one. And then you think, okay, and then charity, and then yeah, like just being kind with nature, like that whole experience there was a very, very charitable idea. And then pilgrimage is almost like a way of saying, well, nature itself, like if you think water and foliage and people, those are the three things that are known to bring joy to people, right? They say that being next to water, just like hearing water, is therapeutic. Uh, Observing nature is therapeutic, and like a kind face or a kind countenance brings joy, which is also something that's kind of therapeutic, right? If you see somebody and they smile at you, you kind of find yourself kind of lifted in some way, like your mood improves. So then you think, okay, well, there, I've got like something that could be maybe there's a prophet that was all he did in the world, and I'm going to call him the one that was able to unlock a lot of meanings, right? There is actually a prophet that was after Ayub or Job. His name was the Kif. Um, it's funny because Kif is maybe something that's kind of like it could be something that's used to measure, like a measuring cup. I don't know, but it's an approximation of the sound of the word locks in Arabic. So I'm going to say he's the one who had a lot of locks. And then by extension, maybe I want to understand that he was able to unlock a lot of meanings. Like, so there's a lock, meaning there's something I don't have access to with some kind of meaning in the world, some kind of discipline or some kind of knowledge, and I want to unlock it. How do I get to a way of understanding a deeper meaning about something? So I'm just going to call this prophet the one with locks. So this is now a toolkit that I have, and I can think I'm going to just wait there and see, you know, from these categories. Like if you think of like Jarvis and the Avengers series, or like Mission Impossible, they have these uh, sort of it's like a dimensionless platform or like widget almost, and you can kind of just like touch and move things around, and it moves with you with ease. You can think that our mind does that without us actually seeing it, but our mind actually does grasp how to pull different ideas from different parts of our memory and then bring it into like language form or maybe written form, or like we think about how to create it with art. So it's really cool when you actually think about that. You're like, well, I can maybe create a type of phone now that shows me how to do that, like how my brain is doing that maybe. And then I can have like these double-sided cameras. So already you're thinking, wow, I've got a completely new, like I've got an invention. And then you start to, so you see how people who really enjoy their work, this becomes their life passion, and they don't feel like they're missing out on like a social aspect of their life until they completely burn out, and then they find that, oh my gosh, I'm on my deathbed, and that's okay, like I had a good life. Or if they keep hitting brick walls around the type of technology that they're building and it's not quite ethical yet, then they might feel like I do need friends and I do need a support to kind of support like all these letdowns that I'm having in my life, that people that can kind of help me um, re-find that kind of industriousness in me and not give up. So, because yeah, sometimes people when they hit brick walls, they end up going to substances or drugs because they become depressed and they start to have less faith in themselves. And that's kind of like a slippery slope downwards, because if you get into these addictions and these drugs, then it's very difficult to find your way back out into kind of like an industrious and productive kind of person who wants to contribute to civilization in kind of like a productive way. So, and it's not to say that people who fall into these traps are not actually contributing to civilization. It's actually a negative form of that, because in having that trial in life, they're actually showing us like later in life or like at the same time in just different scenarios, what can people do to learn from, what your experience has been, so that people say, well, I'm glad that you went through that experience. I'm sorry you did, but I'm hoping that you can recover. And people often do recover. Like they go to like rehabilitation of any kind, uh, overcome their addiction, and then they can become productive members in society again. And it's almost like this trial and error with humanity, such a beautiful way of enriching who we are without feeling like we're judging anybody for the path that their life kind of took them down. So maybe that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to kind of build a kind of like I have this. I've been doing this or creating kind of this calendar. I can't forget this. Um, I've been creating this sort of, it's kind of like a map almost of all the different ways that I am trying to create the pathways that I had to take for uh, building who I am. Like just from last, I think, where did I start? I started in Canada Day, so it's been about 2 months. Just to say, like, what are all the ideas that come to me? It's kind of, it's just a calendar. I just got it from Dollarama. Just goes Monday to Saturday and Sunday. And then there's blank ones. Right. So it's just a massive notepad, because I'm a very visual person and I have to see things displayed in front of me, kind of like a rough way of doing things. I found a digital program. Actually, if I can find it for you guys, I'll link it for you also. And it's called Miro.com, and it gives you, it's basically like a drafting table, right? And it gives you all these templates that are already existing that show you how you can organize different ways of building brainstorming ideas. So let's say like there's different ones for meetings and workplace or workshop, brainstorming and ideation, agile workflows, mapping. You know what? I want to show you what it looks like. I don't know if this is gonna actually work, because to do this, I have to kind of see how this is gonna look. This is gonna be kind of funny. So it just has, like, you guys can't look it up, right? Like I'm making it look like you have to see it right away. But anyway, just for people who may not have um, the patience to kind of flip through something from one to another and just kind of want to wait and see. Uh, like I'm basically trying to allow for different kind of learning styles to kind of present themselves, and then for people to wonder about what is my learning style, what is the most comfortable thing for me to kind of align with, for how I want to be patient with myself and what my educational style can become for myself. So, so what I did was I just almost, so that maybe in 2 years time or 3 years time, I can maybe create a series of videos that show this is kind of what the trajectory can look like if you want to become a digital marketer, right? So you're creating something that's going to maybe sell a product. Like what's the process before all of that, and how long should you allow yourself, right? Because usually whenever we start something new, there's a lot of kind of false starts almost. It's like you start something and then you pause and you find something else and you start and you pause, and all of these drafts almost just think of an essay. It's almost like you're pulling different ideas together, trying to make them cohesive, but you don't really know how they're all going to integrate yet. So you're just kind of like abstract art, you're just making different pieces and just maybe seeing, if I have like 125 pieces of art and I put them kind of like on a wall and I kind of look back and I can say, from all of these, can I make one art? And what would it be? Like, what would this new canvas kind of depict? And that's basically what this is for me. It's just saying, I don't know that I'll remember all these kind of like difficult struggles that I had. And I want to remember them so that, and so I have recorded them so that when I do create a video, that's kind of like encouraging people to try this from like a young age or from any age, I guess, that knowing that you're going to meet these roadblocks and to give yourself at least, 2 or 3 or 4 months to kind of build something that you want to share with the world is a realistic kind of timeline so that you don't feel like you're pressured for time or you're rushed for time. Or if you feel like, I had a full-time job and, I took some time off and maybe, my savings are running out. I have to think of what I want to do. So you think, well, if I give myself 4 months time, then maybe I can find a part-time job to supplement what I want to build and expect income from like, 4 months from now, maybe. Right. So all of these things are what helped me from what other people have also created online to kind of share what their experience has been. And it's just a great way to kind of create that. It's almost like can you think of like a rainbow and the pot of gold? It's almost like after the rain and after the storms and after all that, there's so much light and color, and then there's like some kind of treasure that you can all kind of engage in. It's not just there for one person. So that's the internet.